Three, two, one. Oh, yes. Welcome to the pocket, Kendall. As promised, that was an atonal beginning. And being in Boston, I know that resonates.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
That didn't really make much sense outside of I just assume all the classical composers of the modern world live in Boston.
And all of them play atonal music or compose atonal music.
That's right.
Bring back atonal.
Right. Oh, happy to
Welcome to
be here.
How are you, Kendall?
Hey, I'm doing well on this rainy day in Boston. Happy to be here. Yeah.
I love it. So for everybody who is kind of part of our crew, so Kendall, this podcast came out of Steve and I and our drummer Nathan we all getting back together as the band Everything, really for the first time in like almost 20 years, and realizing that part of what we missed and what we love is the hang, right? Just sitting around talking about stuff. And we decided to launch a little just kind of recorded series of conversations to kind of just sort of celebrate our scene, especially people we've known for a long time on the road, but we also wanted to extend that conversation into some of the newer people that we've met and kind of resonated with. And you and I know each other from the Hatch Experience community. And even know each other because of, some stuff with Light the Music. So welcome aboard, and just maybe tell us a little bit about yourself and just a little brief history of how you got here, young man.
Yeah. Well, let's see. I'm from Charlotte, North Carolina. Yeah, started music at a very young age, the age of 5. My dad purchased a piano for me, and I remember going to the piano, and at that time I couldn't read music, and so I would actually go and just start writing my own music. At that point, he noticed that oh, okay, like there seems to be some level of natural talent there. So he purchased me a piano that transitioned to cello. And yeah, so I'm a cellist, and I'm also a composer. Those are the things that I do pretty much full time outside of being a husband and a father. So that's definitely full time. Yeah, came to move to Boston to pursue a graduate program at Boston University, where I got my master's degree. Became a part of a quartet, done a lot of touring, and yeah, that leads me to where I am right now. That's all, everything in a nutshell, I would say.
Nice nutshell.
And just for our listeners, what was the name of the quartet?
Yes, so the name of the quartet is the Sons of Serendip. We were finalists on season 9 of America's Got Talent. And that was just a crazy experience in itself, which I'm sure we can talk more about. But yeah, it's been great being with the group. I guess I should say pre-COVID, we were touring maybe 60 to 80 shows a year. Right at 2019. I think we were away from home more than we were home. So, it's been an amazing ride. Been able to see parts of the country that I know for certain I never would have traveled to, but finding just such amazing beauty there, and of course with like the natural landscape, but also with the people. So many amazing people we've been able to meet and share our stories with, hear their stories. And it's really brought a lot of healing on both sides with this group. So super grateful.
Yeah. And if you're just checking this out, and the reason that you're listening to this is because you're a fan of the band Everything, check out Sons of Serendip. It's really, really cool stuff. And just love what you guys have done and created. And the creation story of that is really cool too. So maybe we'll jump into that.
Yeah.
I have one technical question, and we can cut this out. My Scarlett twice now has like like shifted off and shifted back on for some reason. It's just sitting here, but is that doing anything to the audio to you guys?
Nope.
Okay, cool.
No,
Then
it sounds
I'm
good.
just going to ignore it then.
Okay.
All right, jumping back in. So I had a like kind of follow-up question. As you were growing up, was there a moment, and this is from the age of 5 to, to sometime before Sons of Serendip, but did you have a moment where you were like this, like this is what I want to do with my life? And can you talk about that?
Yeah, that's a great question. Let's see. So whenever I've had actually a few of those moments. I think let me think of what's the best ones to share. So I remember when I chose the cello. I was in elementary school, 5th grade, and my music teacher uh, laid all the string instruments on the floor and asked us to choose one to go stand by the instrument that we wanted to play. And he went through and kind of demonstrated what each of those instruments sounded like. So he went through the violin. I remember thinking, my gosh, this is nice. A little too screechy for me. Then he moved to the viola. I was like, just didn't sit right. He went to the double bass. I was, short kid at that time, and I was thinking, there's no way I'm going to be able to carry that on the bus. And then he went to the cello, and I just remember hearing it and thinking, like, whoa, like it was almost as if the instrument had a soul of its own. I don't know, that's weird, but it just really resonated with me. The timbre, the register, uh, I would say even the timbre has some similarities with the human voice, and I've always loved to sing as well. And so, yeah, it really resonated. So I chose the cello, and then soon after that, um, my elementary school took the orchestra and band students to hear the Charlotte Symphony Orchestra perform with Yo-Yo Ma,
Oh,
and that was amazing. He was playing the what was it? It was the Schumann cello concerto,
Ooh.
and I remember hearing that piece and just how he was just pouring out his heart, his soul, everything into this beautiful piece of music. But as he was pouring himself out, like you were able to follow the story that he was trying to tell. And I was just blown away and mesmerized by it. And there's a particular part in the concerto where um, you know it kind of strips down to like a very small, like a smaller, more intimate ensemble where it's just the solo cellist and then like the principal cellist of the cello section. And so they're kind of playing this duet together. And oh man, like just hearing the conversation between those two instruments and like what they were like, even though it wasn't with words, I could completely understand, what they were communicating with one another. And then when the whole orchestra came back in to accompany them and support them, oh, it was amazing. So I remember that really sold the deal for me. Um, I said, if I can, build a strong enough foundation on the cello, technically, which allows me the I guess the capacity to be able to express myself musically. Um, you know, this could really be an amazing way for me, like to tell stories, to work out any type of internal turmoil, or just things that we all go through, emotional stuff. But it would be a beautiful channel for me to kind of express myself with. And so yeah, that it sold the deal that day after hearing Yo-Yo Ma.
I have amazing, what an incredible musician, right? Like just how versatile and
Yeah.
virtuosic.
Yeah.
Is
Mhm.
that is that the word?
Absolutely.
Virtu
Yeah.
virtuoistic.
Yeah.
So I have two questions. One, what are some of the other musical heroes you have, like starting with like the cello, because I'm thinking of Pablo Casals, because I
Okay.
got really into him. But
Yeah.
and then I have a follow-up question around the power of music. So just, yeah, talk a little bit about some of your musical idols, and if there's a cello person in there, bring it.
Yeah. Yeah. So, it's I have a mix of cello people and composers, um, especially film composers. But cellist, there's a cellist by the name of Stephen Iserlis, and then another by Truls Mork. And these are just other amazing cellists who have um, mastered the ability to tell stories, through music and with their instrument. Their approach to the cello, it's like they become one with the instrument. And all the way from the tone that they play with, the vibrato, which connects each one of these notes so elegantly. Yeah, I remember just whenever I was in school listening to these guys play, and it's like, man, like I want to sound like that, but, but eventually, really finding value and appreciation in my own unique voice on the cello. But yeah, they definitely helped me, I guess, set the bar high. Um, yeah, that's what I would say. Those are cellists. And then when it comes to composers, man, there's Brahms, there's Dvorak, um, there's Beethoven, of course. I remember just listening and playing, goodness, I feel like most of his symphonies, just as just as I was going through my bachelor's degree and master's degree with the symphonies that I've been a part of. um and then film composers, you have Hans Zimmer, but John Williams is my favorite. Just the um gosh, the palette of colors that man uses to like to help to create these beautiful images, um, and tell beautiful stories, and also support the film, that he's writing to. It's just absolutely amazing. So yeah, it's a combination of instrumentalists and also composers that have really kind of helped to keep me going.
Yeah. John Williams, he's like the Beethoven of, I think of all the people, like, 100 or 200 years from now, of all the composers from this era, from this particular moment in time, I think he'll be the one that like is at the top as far as like,
Yeah.
the test of time. And it's funny, like you said, the power that he has, for like a Superman or Star Wars, or, some of these classics. But then like, he turns around and uh, there's I've been watching movies where I was just like, man, this is what a great soundtrack.
Yeah.
And it was like, oh, that's John Williams. Like he's doing
Hmm.
that. Like yeah, like you said, his palette of different styles that he can do that just always support the movie and always just create that amazing magical thing that music to picture can do. It's like yeah, he's such an
Yeah,
idol.
it's special. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Um, the other thing that my part two of my question
Mm,
is a little more existential in nature, and like you touched on it about playing music, and that you inherently knew that if you chose this path and that instrument, that would give you personally a toolkit to work through whatever is happening in your life.
mm,
And, Steve and I have gone through a lot of different iterations of musical careers where we were on the road, we were totally dedicated, we changed, we got into production. Steve's an educator now. I do digital marketing and some other things. But for me, sitting down and playing guitar and singing, that's a corrective experience for me, right? If it's like yoga, right? Like, oh, I got a problem, I sit down and play, and like, oh, I feel better, right? And especially with what we're hearing now with a new wave of COVID-19, like talk a little bit about like where you see the power of music taking you right now and sort of how it can help us communally? I know that's a big question. So, field it however you want to field it, because we're all, since you and I set this podcast up, the world has kind of shifted again, right? And we're all having to do this calculus around like, well, how are we going to move? What's going to happen with school? And all of these things, the mind is just starting to go.
No, I think it's a good question. It's a little discouraging just kind of seeing, I guess, the trajectory, how things are going. But I have seen time and time again, and experienced the healing power of music. How it can be used to really uplift and encourage, even edify. So because I know, in a sense, it's a power. In a sense, it's like, okay, I've been given this gift, and it pulls at heartstrings. It comforts and offers a level of solace to souls. I just can't sit on it, especially during a time like this. My gosh, we really haven't experienced anything like this before, and people are really struggling. So I'm constantly thinking of ways that I can use the gift to help encourage people and strengthen them during this time. During 2020, whenever the pandemic, when it was really on the scene, we were going through, and 2020 was rough, but there's the pandemic, and there was the racial pandemic, in regards to the police brutality, and just really this systematic racism, those conversations really becoming, they were hot topics, and it caused a lot of folks to turn inward, to, okay, like, what are some unhealthy views that I've been holding, towards people, or a particular group of people. And they're tough things to grapple with, and we all are guilty of it in some form or some capacity. And so one of the things that I am grateful for is, during that season, there were a lot of organizations, some Fortune 500 companies that began to reach out to me, to come in and open up some of their conferences. And these conferences, the topics were, anti-racism, or how to make, the workplace a safer environment for folks of all colors, ethnicities. Just how to kind of deal with these injustices. And I'm so humbled and grateful that they, one, reached out to me, but they recognize the power of music, and how you can really use music to soften hearts, in order for those hearts to be able to receive and hear tough messages. And so, they would call me in, and I would play for, it would range from 10 minutes to 30 minutes before they really started diving deep. And it was just an amazing experience to see the walls just come down, and to see the facial expressions of just a softness, more of an openness, to what was going to be coming afterwards. And, so the directors, they would reach out to me and they would say, hey, they're like, the conference was such a success. Like, folks really received, the message and what we were trying to get to them. And we believe that it was, I don't want to say it was attributed to the music, but the music helped, it helped a lot. And it might not have sat as deep if the music hadn't kind of gotten in there to crack those hard hearts, that we all, can kind of develop over time. So to answer your question, what am I planning on doing during this season? It's definitely more of that. Composing more music. Most of the pieces that I would perform for these organizations were my own original pieces that I actually wrote in 2020 as a way to kind of lift like I was feeling really heavy and really discouraged. It's like, oh my gosh, all this is going on, people are dying, for, through the pandemic, but also from, all these racial things. It was just crazy, then having a son, a Black son, so my wife and I, it was tough. And so, as I said before, what got me into music was being able to see how one could pour themselves out through an instrument, through notes, and it not only helps to bring healing and comfort to the listener, but also to the one that's sharing it. And so I turned to that, and I started creating these pieces that, it's pretty much just my heart and how I was, my emotions, my raw emotions in musical form. And so I created all these songs, and eventually my wife said, you should just compile them and turn them into an album. I was like, whoa, like I actually hadn't thought of that. And then the thought was, oh, well, that's wonderful, because then hopefully, my rustlings through, these really tough things will kind of help to accompany others on this journey as they're wrestling through it as well. And that's what happened. I released it, and some amazing doors opened, and people were really touched by it. So, Craig, I know it's a big question, and I hope I hit it. I might have kind of drifted off to something.
I was about to say, Kendall, I'm a salty bastard, but I'm feeling pretty emotional over here. Like, I mean, really nailed it. And I didn't mean to. I mean, well, I did mean to ask a big question, because I've experienced some of your playing through some of our hatch calls last year. I was thinking, like, hard be the heart that can deny a well played cello. And it's amazing, because I think that, this third wave, like, look, it's not the first wave, right? We've learned so much. We have vaccinations, they work. Like, it's so many people got vaccinated, right? It's actually a miracle that as many people got vaccinated as they did. Like, we forget that actually happened, and so we're in a much better place. But it's that big reminder that, like, hey, the work's not done, like, on all of it, right? On all of the pandemics, right? The racial pandemic, the actual disease pandemic, the mental pandemic, all of that stuff. And, like, just thinking about the cello, it's like it fosters interpersonal trust, right? Because as I've, like everybody, been overwhelmed and my head's fallen off, where it's just like, okay, well, how have I been in my life that has been out of balance? And, I don't know if you knew this about me, Kendall, but I'm 8 years sober. So Steve went through my adventure with me in the 20s, where I was like an insane person. And it led to me, like, trying to put that fire out with drugs and alcohol. And it's like, I'm super lucky to be alive. And so I'm hyper conscious of, like, all of the things that have been out of balance in myself, but still, it's like, there's all of this work to be done. And one of the things that I keep coming up to, and Dave Chappelle actually talked about this in, like, some interview. He's like, we need interpersonal trust, right? Because we're being hit with so many messages and we're so connected and there's so much stuff going on and there's all this like, oh, you need to be this way and this is what's up. It's hard to track it. And what you're talking about with the cello, and there's something magical about that instrument. You go in and you say, let's play some cello. Let's do some sonic yoga together and let's just soften the heart up so that we can foster interpersonal trust so that we can have these discussions. And then when somebody says that uncomfortable truth, the mind doesn't shut down because we all have an inner child. And if the wrong message comes at the wrong time, it's like, okay, well, let me put this down here. And you just start battling based on, it's like ego, right? I mean, at the end of the day, it softens that ego so that we can all get down and go, oh, you know what? You're right. Like, no. And like, let's work on this together. And I'm just so glad that you answered that question because I know this about you. And I know that you've probably been under a lot of pressure because everybody's like, ask Kendall, right? He's in a really unique position in this world. He plays a really unique instrument that has this like special power. Like, I mean, I'm selfish to have you on here because I want to have a really good cello player in my mix when it's time when we need cello, right? So it's like, you know, there's like a little selfishness in there, but it's, you know, I just know that a lot of people have come to ask you for help. And so I'm glad that you answered that question and you did great. And I'm pretty emotional from that answer because I think you articulated so many things that we've all felt.
Wow. Thank you, Craig.
I absolutely. And ditto. It's such a good answer. And I think the thing that's happened is not only is this like an ongoing, you know, there are these difficult challenges, but the trauma from that has built up too. And the disconnection that we've all felt as we've hunkered down, like all of that has kind of like compounded all of this. And I think the role of social media in that, which because of that disconnection, that it's so much easier to be outraged or to be, you know, negative because you're not face to face with somebody, you're not on that human level. And I think you said it in a couple of different ways, but just really that music has like this magical power to connect, to just like go in, you know, to whatever you come to that board meeting or putting something on to listen to or, you know, those musical experiences. Suddenly music just goes in there and does its magical thing. And I think the inclusiveness of that too is super powerful, that like it can do that with all kinds of different people. And I think that is like a superpower for someone like you to be able to wield, because like you said, you started with your own experience, your own emotional, you know, trauma, you know, uncomfortable stuff. And then as you express that becomes this thing that does that with other people and opens their hearts. And I think that's just such a powerful thing. And it goes to my soapbox, which kind of is the beginning of your story, which is connection and inclusion for students, you know, and bringing students into, whether it's pop music or classical music or whatever that is, but bringing them into that power, you know, bringing them into that ability to express and connect. And that's, you know, it's what I'm super passionate about right now, because it can be so powerful. It can be so transformative, and it can be so inclusive. So yeah,
absolutely. Thank you,
Steve. Kendall, have you ever heard of, let me get I think his name is Dr. Bessel Vanderkolk or Vanderkolk. He's in Boston.
Oh,
matter of fact,
this down.
He is probably one of the leading, so the Boston Trauma Center. So he is one of the leading researchers on psychological trauma. And I came to know his work through trauma-informed yoga. So I have taught yoga. I helped stand up a yoga studio down here, and I got really interested in trauma-informed yoga. So I did a little training through an organization connected to the Trauma Center, which also led to kind of me being certified and teaching yoga for people in recovery. So I started to go, oh, there's this whole world around psychological trauma and, you know, the idea of complex trauma, which is relational trauma, over time, right? So it's not just like, hey, I got into an accident, I have post-traumatic stress. It's like, hey, I was in an abusive relationship for 10 years. I was kidnapped. I was blank, blank, blank. And I started to go down this route. And we're talking about like 2020 just was this fire of trauma. Like all of this came up in all of these different ways across like society. And I thought like, gosh, trauma is the devil's playground, right? I mean, how many artists do we know out there? I mean, look, people like me, artists, they're like trying to fill this hole in their life and they're trying to overcome this trauma, and they almost kind of become it more by trying to overcome it in a way that's egoic or something like that. So as we're talking about this, it's like, the cello is like something that helps trauma, right? That's that healing power. And like, I would love to see a study on that, Kendall.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, especially cello, because like you said, the connection to the human voice. I don't know if there's an instrument that connects more to the human voice, which has that extra, like goes in a little deeper, just because it already is, we're wired to hear it. We're wired to like for it to like really, tell its story to a, that whatever that deep part in our brain, that music is just like right in.
Right.
Can we get a grant and set up speakers on street corners in cities around the country to start with, in the world, and just have a little subwoofer so it vibrates the ground, and we'll just have like a little cello music, a synchronized cello music, a vibrational cello music,
Yeah.
World's largest cello happy hour.
So speaking of which, I'm curious, what musically, what did you do? Was it solo cello? Was it like and kind of not only what you did for these sort of board meetings, but also your album? Like, tell us a little bit about that, and especially for somebody who maybe hasn't heard of you. Because it's a really interesting blend of sort of classical and not classical and all of that.
Yeah, no, thank you. It's I would say primarily, at least with the album, the featured instrument was the cello, and then I would use my voice as the accompaniment, which is normally the opposite. It's it's normally when we think of who has the lead, it's like normally always the vocalist, and then the instruments accompany that. But I decided to switch it up and use the cello as the voice that's telling the story. And it's something, I don't know, at least for me, sometimes words get in the way. and English, just language in general, it just really doesn't encompass like all of the emotions and the feelings. I don't really want to get too deep into it, but there's just more limits. And so that's another reason why I decided to just use the cello as the vehicle to deliver the message. It can speak to a heart in such more deeper and profound words, and I feel profound ways than I feel like words could ever do. So I focused on the cello. So I just feel it. Anyway, so focused on the cello. Use the voice to accompany that. And so that's kind of how that was the that was kind of how I created that album. And Steve, remind me, what was the second part of the question?
That was pretty much it. Just
Okay.
stylistically, kind of what you were doing, and even on like a technical level. I'm like curious, like you. So I'm at like some Fortune 500 company, and I'm the something of marketing, and I show up to this Zoom call, and there you are. Is that solo cello, or did you like mix it up? Did you have like looping stuff? Did you have beats? Like what that sound like?
Yeah, no, thank you for that reminder. It was a combination of solo cello with some looped material. Um, I would kind of layer maybe one or two. Well, to be honest, now that I think about it, um, with some of them, I would actually create um, a score. So there were different layers of strings, of pads, of some of the more larger ones, had some percussion. Um, and then I would kind of go in a sense, improv over this bed of sound, which told a story within itself and had a natural progression. But yeah, I would kind of go in it and just improvise over that. So it was a combination of works that were a little bit more produced, and then those that kind of uh, that came from just my album Salah, and then others that were I just created in the moment, just through improvisation and what I was feeling, and maybe after reading the room, kind of sensing what was needed, um, and creating something from that. And then other times, you have this plan of, okay, I'm going to play this piece. Oh, but oh man, this one kind of, I'm getting it confused with this other one. And so, sometimes that would happen where like one would flow into the other. And then it's like, you know what? I'm just going to free flow and just just follow what naturally is taking place. We can create all these plans and my gosh, all these lists. And it's like, you feel like things need to happen this way or that. But just when you're in the moment, your body, the soul, everything's like, no, it needs to take a different path. And so I would kind of just be free in that way as well. So
Totally. Great answer. And it's funny because the way that you're talking about classical music,
mm,
again and again, it sounds like pop music. It sounds like from your very first experience, like you were talking about, it's speaking to you and almost, and then going to see the symphony and almost like the first time I saw, an artist and I was just like, oh, that, like when I saw Paul Simon perform, I was just like, oh, that, like that's it, and that, just that experience of connection with it and the stories that you got from that, like the narrative thread that you got from that, like is like a lot of people get from a singer-songwriter, and like that's why they're fans of that singer-songwriter. But then even to like the way that you're creating and performing that, I've worked with a lot of classical musicians, and there's a range, of course, but like I've had amazing players
mhm.
come in and work on, something that I was doing, a score or a commercial or something. And they were like, I'll play whatever it is that you want as long as it's written down. And
Oh yes.
I'd be like, oh, but I just have these chord changes and just kind of like, just give me something, like half notes,
Right.
whole notes, whatever it is. But like, so it's interesting that there's been this line, and it goes back to like how kids are educated and like, those sort of pathways in how we teach and how we learn music. But it's really cool to see that, sort of starting to go away, where between music technology and the blurring of the lines between all the genres, that like that that performance technique that you're describing of like being free with it and being able to go where your heart wants to go is like what a wonderful thing to have in that, in that idiom,
Yeah. No, no, absolutely. It's I'm glad that you mentioned that. You know, so improvisation is not something that um I would say probably in most um conservatories, it's not something that's really um taught.
Right.
Um,
But
you know,
it
you
should
go,
be. Oh,
oh gosh, because I mean, Steve, to be honest, that's kind of, I mean, Bach. I mean, come on, like, you look at his suites, I mean, it's like that was improvisation. Like classical music, in a sense, had its beginnings in improvisation. These composers that we revere, they were masters at improvisation. But, now we've moved so far from it. And I think that from by that, we've lost something as well. We've lost that freedom. And my experiences, just in my classical training is very a little more rigid, and um, I remember performing and kind of feeling like, you're kind of like in this box. You're playing these pieces by folks that have been dead for, so, forgive me, but for so long, and so, just the culture is, you try to stick, so you try to stick true to the time period. And but I tell you, once I kind of um, uh, started learning more about improvisation, um, it freed up my playing so much. Just so much. And even though I was playing the notes on the page, there was such a freedom even within and in between those notes. Um, and to be honest, I was forced um, to learn how to improvise. I don't know if we have enough time for this story, but um, I just graduated from Boston University, and the plan was to um, create this album, and it would reach the top of the Billboard charts, and things would just be perfect. It would be lucrative. Excuse me. And so I fortunately I got this grant, or I guess I should say sponsorship, which funded this album, music video, created the album, did the recording, all of that. But it got held up, and eventually, what ended up happening was um, there was 9 months that myself and another member of, actually, Sons of Serendip, we were roommates. He was one of my roommates. We didn't have any income coming in at all. And so we started busking 5 days a week. And that's how we that's how we paid our rent for 9 months. But
Amazing.
down there, there was, just in the classical world, it's one of those things where uh, when you're playing, everyone is supposed to be just perfectly quiet, don't move. And if you drop something, how dare you? If you yawn, it's just so much like intensity. But that can kind of attach itself to your personality, and like how you carry yourself, and you start to take yourself too seriously. Like, that's not the world. It's like in the moments when I felt like I was playing the most beautiful line of music, and because I had practiced like all these hours to get this particular phrase exactly how I wanted it. It's like someone's out here having a baby. Someone's being brought into the world, someone's leaving the world. It's just like there's so many other things that are going on. And so going down into the subway, it humbled me, because whenever those moments would come up where I was like, okay, here's that moment that I worked so hard for, someone's like hacking up, like, so, or, there's this random rodent that just runs across the tracks. So it's just, it was such a beautiful experience, humbling experience. But within that, I was so uncomfortable, because the music that we were creating and playing down there was not written down. It all came from the heart. And did I feel vulnerable? Absolutely. Like, did it feel gross? Absolutely. But man, once I worked through that, it really benefited, I think, my playing just as a musician, and with every genre that I've worked in. It really freed me up. So yeah, improvisation is yeah,
It's
it's a good thing.
it's
Yeah.
back to that human connection thing, I think, especially when you're right there in, not even in a concert, not even in a, like, these people came to see you,
Yeah.
you're just like, you happen to like connect for 2 seconds or 20 seconds or 2 minutes. And as that happens, you either connect or you don't,
Yeah.
and so it
Yeah.
teaches you to tune into that. And Craig and I,
Absolutely.
God, we had so much, crazy experiences like that, where we would be put into a situation where we weren't the right band. for this concert. You know, like we were hired, somebody decided that we'd be great for, you know, some middle-aged singles group in Virginia Beach, you know, and like
Right.
we're playing like Fishbone and ska and like we're jumping
Oh
around
God.
and like
Yeah.
and what we found in those moments was this wonderful freedom of like, you know what? Like we can do whatever we want in this moment. We can connect with each other on stage and just like enjoy that. And then what if what we find also connects with the room? And as we
Absolutely.
played hundreds and thousands of shows, that superpower, we developed that, you know, like you get to where you can really feel that and be in that moment while you're channeling the musical muse as well. And that's
Absolutely.
back to that, you know, just that magical power.
Yeah. And as you said, in a sense, it's just authentically being you, just bringing the gifts and the talents that you have, connecting with the group that you have. And, it has to touch someone, At
Well,
least
and the
that's the
more,
hope.
yeah, and the more that you connect with your heart, the more that you can actually like express that. And Craig is, he also has the benefit of words. Like I'm more with you. Like I've always like, music has always been the language. Like when I
Yeah.
listen even to a song, like I always hear the language of the music before I hear the words.
Yeah.
But Craig
Yeah.
actually has he has the additional superpower of actually being able to put words on top of all that, which is,
Wow.
yeah,
Sometimes it doesn't feel super.
it's a
Um,
blessing and a curse.
well, that's,
There we go.
and it's interesting, a bunch of things. So funny, going back to Kendall, you talking about like doing 60 to 80 concerts a year with Sons of Serendip. And in the back of my mind, I was just like, right now, being a family man, not being on the road, I'm like, God, that sounds like so many. But when we were, Steve and I, and doing the everything thing, I mean, for almost 10 years, we were doing 220 days a year. Right. So, I mean, it
Wow.
was just full on. And I mean, early on, like we were
Tremendously.
just out of control. And it would be like, we'd play a bar, they would hire us because they, word on the street, they needed to hire us, and they'd pay us like $300 or whatever. And we would go in there and there would be like 60 people in this bar. And at the end of the night, there would be 10 people because we chased everybody out. But those 10 people were our people. And then it was just like, it started to happen to be like, hey, there's 12 people at the end of the night. And then there's 15.
Right.
And then there's less people who don't know what's going on. So there's less of them that leave and more of them who've told their friends.
Right.
And we just like learned through like those mistakes of like, oh yeah, that's like, that doesn't work. Not only for this crowd, but that just doesn't work.
That's
Like that's an own goal. Like get rid of that right there. Hey,
right.
what's the name of your solo record of cello pieces that we're talking about? Because we want to make sure that we get links to people so they can hear
Oh,
you.
thank
And I
you.
also want to talk a little bit about your composition stuff as well.
Okay. Yeah. The name of the album is Salah. And so I released that last year. And super grateful. Several of those pieces have been licensed on television shows and some podcasts. So yeah, super grateful for that, and that it's connecting with folks. So yeah, it's called Salah.
Cool. And is this related to the stuff that you and I talked about? Because we'd had a discussion around some stuff coming up for you for licensing and some composition. So let's like get into your composing world, because I know that you have some really amazing stuff starting to pop up.
Yeah. I've always been a huge fan of film scores. Gosh, I just love it. This cinematic style of music from whenever I was a kid. And so you know, whenever I mentioned to you guys, I started writing whenever I was very young. That's continued. Um, so it went from solo piano pieces to cello pieces to string quartets to string orchestras to like just full out epic full symphonies. Um, and so yeah, I've really been just honing the skill. um, One of the things that the pandemic has offered, as you mentioned, Craig, is we are home a lot more. um, and whenever I was on the road, uh, it's it's a challenge, kind of been able to hone in or focus on it, other other gifts that you may possess, because it's city to city, state to state. So, you know, uh, since I've been home, and most of our shows now are virtual, I've been able to just focus on writing, and so yeah, I mean, this is probably the fifth single. I'm releasing another single on August 20th titled "The Warrior King," and it's a little bit of a sequel from another piece that I released a few months ago, I guess in March, called "The Birth of a King." And so yeah, Warrior King is it's full orchestra, uh, but it features the cello. The cello is the storyteller, and it's kind of telling this story of a king, and just the innumerable obstacles that he comes up against. But even with all these challenges, he's really the one that's going to change the world for the better. And so yeah, it's a sequel of a piece that I previously wrote. But yeah, it's I use there's some amazing music libraries out there now. East West, Spitfire has some great libraries. 8DO. So I use these music libraries, which essentially are samples, where they've recorded orchestras, from different parts of the world, different instrumentalists from different parts of the world, choirs from different part of the world, and they assign each note, or they assign each instrument and its note a position on the keyboard. So instead of using the old way of pen and paper, you're able just to come on your MIDI controller and or keyboard and just play out these full orchestral arrangements, just with these samples. And so I've been, which is a lot of how a lot of film composers write these days when you don't have access to an orchestra. And so I've been just focusing on that, and the response has been just super encouraging. And as I'm releasing more opportunities have been presenting themselves, like to score podcasts and to score trailers, and so it's really exciting, because it's in those moments that I'm really just pouring out all of myself. There's a combination of cello with the large orchestral accompaniment, which I love so much. It's super fulfilling. So I'm really enjoying it.
I
What
love
enjoying it.
quick tech question. What DAW are you using to what's the brain that you're using to put all this
I
together?
use Logic Pro. Yeah, I've been using Logic for years, and I feel like I understand its language. So yeah, I'm sticking with that until it doesn't work anymore. So
Yeah. And then
Yeah.
are you ever pushing that out into notation for any reason, or is it all just it stays in the box?
Yeah, no, that's good. So with with the cello compositions, I've just started notating it because there's been cellists that have been reaching out that are wanting to perform it at
Cool.
different venues and different events, which is just incredibly humbling. But with the larger orchestra works, because it's been more just like to score to like media. I haven't had the need to notate it yet. But my wife and I were talking the other day, and we were thinking, man, like it could be really cool if like you could get like a live orchestra to do some of these things and perform some of these pieces. And Logic has a notation feature within within their platform, so it wouldn't be too difficult, or I could hire like an orchestrator or someone to kind of, it takes a lot of time to kind of write
you
out
got to
all those.
clean it all up, and
Oh my gosh,
what
yes.
sounds good, you got to like quantize that and turn it into a whole other
Exactly.
thing. Yeah, totally.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
it's a tedious bit of a tedious process, but so I'm actually leaning more towards notating them than not, just because it opens up even more opportunities to connect with people and larger ensembles. So
Yeah, because you could just like wave a sheet of notes in front of someone like me, in the business, and they'd be like, "Oh my God, this guy's serious!
Oh,
Whoa, this guy's the real deal!" And there's a significant amount of the population in Boston. There's probably in orchestras.
that's true. That's true.
All right,
Yeah.
so here's a thought experiment, and I've been thinking about this.
Mhm.
You have a quartet, violin, a viola, a cello, and the bass. What are the personalities of those instruments? Like, who are those people in that? Because part of me was thinking, like, do people crack on the viola players? Is that like you don't hear about like the famous viola person, and it's kind of like some of the viola again, like
Right, right. No, that's really funny. Normally I don't want to say normally. My experience has been, the violinists are a little bit more type A personalities.
yeah,
Viola's always been like a little bit more earthy. Like the players, they're really connected to nature, and they play with their shoes off. It's like every viola. It's very interesting. I would say the cellist, um, they're the most easygoing, and
yeah.
it's kind of like because I'm a cellist, I feel a little bad. So but I've just found that, like, when you look across the orchestra and you think about the different personalities that come in each section, it's like the cellists are always just like real cool, like and the bass is the same. I don't know, it's something about the lower frequencies that kind of help to, I don't know, bring some sense of calmness. And so yeah, it kind of works its way around, violin, viola, cello, bass, as far as like level of like intensity to chill.
So the bass.
Just my opinion. Don't it's not.
No, that's good. That's a very diplomatic way of I love it. Nobody got thrown under the bus in that quartet,
Right.
so you guys will do well together. Yeah, because I just thought of, like, I was wondering if the bass player is just like, it's mellow but salty, right? Like, look, I'm just
Oh,
going to play these
interesting.
simple notes. You guys do whatever. Just
Right.
let's just do it.
Right. No, that it's very, no, it's very interesting. I don't know. Not too many bases have been too salty. With my particular quartet, it's a little different because it's really mixed up. There's cello, there's a harpist, there's a pianist, and then there's a singer.
Right.
So even just those instruments, they're not really, you don't see those instruments paired together really ever. I don't know if I've really seen that. And so the personalities are, I don't know, Craig. We all get along, thank goodness, and it was that way whenever, with our first rehearsal, we created the group for the TV show, and we came together with these songs, and personality wise, we all clicked immediately. Musically, even though two were from the classical world and the other two were from the more contemporary world, there wasn't any like effort in regards to like, oh, I need to bend my style or way of playing to fit anything. It's just we were able to just present what we had, come with what we had and who we were, and it's pretty crazy, but it just clicked. And I've played with a lot of groups, and that hasn't happened before. And so yeah, it's a very unique group that I'm super grateful to be a part of. But yeah, like I said, the instruments are just different than a traditional string quartet. So I think that kind of helps, I guess.
Yeah, chemistry,
Yeah,
those different
yeah,
personalities that just fit together in a certain way that it just has to be that way, in order
yeah, yeah,
to do what you do musically,
yeah.
and for you to be successful, like that. You can't like draw it out. You can't like, there's not like a formula or anything, but man, that chemistry is just that's that thing.
It's so important. And three members of the group are from the South, so that kind of just we're from a similar region of the country. So I think that kind of helps as well. And the singer, he's very laid back as well. So it definitely helps with, as far as like keeping yeah, just the chemistry, as you said. Yeah, I feel like we all connect very well, and um, we connect like on that like spiritual level almost.
Yeah.
Just the synergy,
Yep.
all of it is there, and I know there's moments when we go to a certain venue that's just absolutely beautiful, and we'll just say, you know what, let's just sit in this moment with our instruments and create a soundtrack for this venue. And it's just amazing how we allow ourselves to get swept up in the music and in the expression. Um, to the point that, afterwards there's just goosebumps, just like it's just really really magical, it's a really, really special group.
That is awesome. What are some of the places that you've been that you just can recall? You're just like, that's my place. I love, and I know there's so many, it's a tough question, but like some things that just resonate. Because we as a band had places that were, for me personally, it was around a lot of times being in a beautiful place, right?
Yeah,
Like Telluride, Steamboat Springs, or cities
yeah,
like Athens, Georgia, that have like a really deep musical scene, or Boulder, Colorado, that had the Fox Theater, or Red Rocks, or something like that,
yeah. No, gosh, as you said, there's a lot. But I think a region, at least of the states, that we just find like some of the most, I would say, gosh, I have to be careful, but the most beauty is just like the West, out West, Midwest, and you get out, in Colorado and Montana and even New Mexico. We went down to the, we try to visit some of the, we try not to just stay within the venue, but we do like some sightseeing and things, and going to the Carlsbad Caverns, these caves, and it's like a city underground, and then you go and you just feel so small in comparison to like just all of this enormous beauty. The mountains of Colorado, and through going through the canyons, my gosh. And then you're able to go after experiencing this beauty, and um we try to include a little bit of improvisation in our concerts, so we'll then take those experiences to the stage, and create these grandiose scores to some of the sites, and yeah, just amazing. The Midwest, I would say probably the Colorado, Montana, the New Mexico, um those have been probably some of our some of our favorite states to perform in. Glenwood Springs,
Oh yeah.
um and then when it comes to venues, um oh gosh, there's a beautiful venue in Sheboygan. um what state is that? Sheboygan,
Is that Michigan, Minnesota? No.
Minnesota. Maybe it's Minnesota. They have in Home Alone, that little band that that they when they long story short, but their band was from Sheboygan. But man, they have such it's called the Wiles Performing Arts Center, but it's absolutely beautiful. Several different balconies, and it's like a forest that they have painted on the walls in the second balcony. And then you look up, and there's like they have a replica of the night sky at a particular hour during the evening, and so the stars are kind of like twinkling, and it's just amazing. That's one of our favorite venues to perform in. We've performed there a few times. And then there's some amazing places in LA. We did the not the Oscars, but the Emmy Awards a few years ago, and I think they were at the Dolby Theater. I can't
Oh
remember if it's
yeah.
the Dolby Theater, but another just a beautiful hall. And then of course like Radio City Music Hall. That's where we lived for while we were on the show, and performing on that. I mean, they have one of the largest stages in the world. Um, performing there every week. Golly, it was just so special, and the huge, like the large amount of folks that were, I mean, the place was pretty much just sold out with just people just cheering and rooting you on. Um, that definitely goes on the list as well. So yeah, I mean, just beautiful places all throughout the country, but I find that we tend to have a little bit more of a bend towards the west. It's just so much like natural beauty with the mountains, the canyons and things. We
Easy to
enjoy
do.
it. Yeah, yeah.
Steve-O, you have anything else, buddy?
I just as a composer, my question is like, what are you doing right now? What are you looking, not not just like the gigs that you're working on or the projects that you're working on, but also like musically, like kind of where are you moving? Where do you see interesting stuff happening, in especially like back to what we were talking about classical music and the way it can change and open up, which I think it has to do in order to survive. But that, like just what are you working on and where do you see like sort of, electricity happening?
Yeah, yeah. No, thank you for that question. You know, electricity. Electricity all around. I would say, um, the performing live is just not, it's not happening at the same capacity that it was. Forgive me if you hear my son in the background. They just got home from a walk, but
Life, essence of life.
right. But yeah, so the live performances just taken on a different nature, and um, you know, things have pivoted to in person to virtual, and we the group has there's an amazing platform called what is the name of it? Jam Kazam, that allows us to perform live but remotely. So from our own studios in our homes, we don't have to come together. So
You've
that's
got
opened up.
you've gotten that to work? Like
Yeah. Oh, tell
the
me about it. That's
latency. Yeah, 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 yeah. But if you've just yes or no, you've gotten that to work with
we,
the four of you and like the latency, like you worked it out?
we've gotten it to work, and
Dude,
the latency is very minimal.
good.
Um, and they've gone through different updates, and sometimes some updates are better than others. But right now it's at a place now that we're able to perform and give master classes, pretty effortlessly, which is good. So continuing with the virtual, but there's this such a has always been, but even more so now, a passion for scoring for media, scoring for film. And so I'm there's been more and more opportunities that are opening up in that area for me, and it's beautiful because I can do it from my studio, and then after I write for a little bit, I can go play with my son, and so we can go to the park or something, so it's um I love that, and it's extremely fulfilling because I feel like I'm able to really just pour out all of myself. um yeah, and so I'm very, there's a lot of passion there, um and I'm directing even more of my energies, um kind of in that direction, while continuing to perform virtually, while we're kind of still in a form of lockdown in a sense, because of the pandemic. um but yeah, that's kind of the goal for this
Yeah.
year at least.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
when my kids were super young, I was for about 10 years I did music to picture. So
Oh,
everything
nice.
from commercials to film and television, and it was like you said, it was perfect cuz like I could do it from home. It was flexible, like I could kind of pick my own hours,
Yeah,
and I worked a lot sort of in the times that they were sleeping, or
yeah,
they were spending more time with their mom, and so we could like really kind of sculpt that. And it was wonderful because I was there, like
yeah.
I was a working musician spending time with my family at the same time. So yeah, like
Wow.
that's such a great path. Like I loved doing it as well. I think there's
Yeah,
just this amazing alchemy, this magic that happens with music to picture. But
yeah, yeah,
but that other part of it was how it integrated into my life and really made it possible for me to live out, you know, where we lived as a band, like out in the middle of nowhere.
Wow.
And to like still be a gigging working musician because I was doing these jobs, and to like,
Yeah.
you know, raise my kids out there. It was awesome.
That's really awesome. Really awesome.
Yeah.
Because
No,
it's tough, raising your kids and being on the road all the time.
yeah,
That's golly,
so
so
hard. Yeah.
yeah.
Yep.
So, Kendall, young Steven is a very talented composer, and he writes. He's an adventurous composer. He studied
Okay.
under Dr. John Hilliard at James Madison University, and I was lucky enough to take some classes from him as well. And
Yeah.
and John was like he loved good abstract music. And so Steve
Wow.
was actually the one that turned me on to Charles Ives. And I, being a word guy and liking to read, I would do deep dives on these composers. And I remembered Ives' story, where he was doing this atonal stuff in the late 1800s. And I don't know if you know much about him, but he went to, I think it was Yale, one of the Ivy League schools, and he was like the star quarterback. And he
Mm.
talked about like his favorite moment playing the football games. He was like, I liked being the quarterback, but what I really liked was when both marching bands would show up and
Ah.
we're like playing at the same time, like competing, and you would have these totally crazy, chaotic battles of music going. And he was just like, my ultimate dream would be to have a marching band on a hillside of one part of the valley and another one on the other part of the valley, and having them play completely unrelated
Wow.
pieces of music. And apparently his dad might have had some history as like a band director for the military during the Civil War, maybe. And his dad would like train him by doing duets. Like, all right, we're going to do a duet, and son, you're going to play in an unrelated key, and we're going to do a
Mm.
duet. So he grew up with this like atonal thing. And I think he sort of figured out like, oh, hey, I'm probably not going to make a bunch of money doing composition. So what I'm going to do
Right.
is I'm going to form an insurance company. And he became the president
Oh.
of an insurance company. So he was this wealthy insurance guy, but he was composing all of these symphonies
Mm.
on the side, right? So he was talented enough that he could be like writing his programs out. And I think that at some point, enough people played his music and hated him for it because it was atonal, and they were like, "Sorry, bro." He was just like, "I'm over it." And it wasn't
Right.
until Bernstein, I think, in the early '50s,
Mm.
like 30 years later, like years after people were trying to play Ives stuff, Bernstein did a piece of his music and was going to do it, I guess, was at the New York Philharmonic. And
Yeah.
Charles Ives was so traumatized by his experience, he refused to go to the concert. And he sat in his
Wow.
kitchen, and his wife went, and he was just like listening on the radio because he's like, I'm just going to assume that everybody's going to hate me, and it's going to be mad
Oh.
at me for the atonal music. And of course, Bernstein crushes it. And then America was like, this is a great American composer, and
Right.
he became
Right.
Charles Ives. But I love that story. So maybe we can make a gentleman's agreement that like once we heal the world through cello music, that we loop back around and we try to get people back on the atonal scene.
You know, all kidding aside, it's something I'm really interested in, and it's pop music is moving more and more towards that. It has to, because the tonality has to keep getting more. Otherwise, you have that experience of like, oh, I've heard this before. You know, it's the same chord progressions, etc. But
Yeah.
so polytonality is where we're at right now, where it's really interesting. And I'll geek out, and I know we got to wrap this up, but like
Mm.
I've been paying attention to that, and it's truly interesting, like a Rihanna track, or like this stuff that is starting to like put the notes out of the scale into the music, and
Yeah.
it's really cool to see. And of course, like hip hop, with the way you layer samples and stuff, that there's always been more of that there, just
Mhm.
because of the nature of the beast. But like it's really interesting to see that intentionally being created now with melodies that don't sit in the scale, and so that polytonality and different harmonic centers, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, it's
Yeah.
exciting. And I think it just I'm like, I always try and imagine like what pop music might sound like in 10 years or 20 years. And
Right.
I'd
Right.
be surprised if it didn't have more of that in it, because it kind of like, I think things just kind of push that way, and culturally
Right.
other stuff happens too. Like like a dark era in culture that like maybe that's what we're going through now, or that
Yeah,
trauma that
yeah,
we were talking about, that like it shows up in that, you know, dissonance and
yeah.
how we create in it.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, it'll be interesting. I remember, I mean, it's a part of the curriculum, in undergrad and grad, just atonal music and learning how it's constructed. And I was always kind of like, oh man, it's just kind of
Yeah, it feels
feels a little
icky.
funny.
Yeah.
But it's very interesting though, because like you said, playing everything within the key all the time, it's a little too, the dissonance. My gosh, I mean, you appreciate the sunshine more after you've kind of gone through a storm, which is, the dissonance, the notes that don't necessarily fit in the chord. And so I feel the same way with music. And a lot of composers, they use that contrast to really push home the message and the stories that they're trying to tell. Creates that friction, and then that sense of release. Once you kind of release that, you're back into that land of tonality. So yeah, no, I definitely agree with you, and I feel like especially after this season, if we can make it through this season, I agree. The music, it'll be really interesting hearing the types and styles of music that kind of birth from this experience, because it's been dark. You know,
Yeah.
Everything can't be, one chord on C major. It's like we have to get a little bit of crunch there to really express fully what we've gone through, and like you said, the trauma. um, yeah, it hasn't been easy. So it'll be interesting to see where it takes us.
Yeah. And really quickly, what our program does, what Light the Music does with kids is it gives them the tools. Like we put them into a DAW called Soundtrap, and immediately the first thing that they do is like a sonic collage. So we
Mm,
show them a piece of abstract art and we say, hey, this is art. It doesn't have to say anything. It doesn't have to be a picture of. And so what we get them to do is just use the tools without turning on that filter of like it has to sound good. It has to be
yeah.
like something on the radio. And then the stuff that they create is just so interesting. Like with
Wow.
that, you know, not knowing music theory and not, you know, like just like putting sounds together and putting pitches together and like arrhythmic, atonal, like
Yeah.
all of that stuff. It's really fascinating. Like just like I get to listen to this stuff, you know,
Yeah.
teachers send me, you know, these projects and it's just like,
Right.
wow, like, you know, like these kids,
Right.
fifth, sixth grade kids are creating stuff that like I would love to put it up against like a musicologist or a music theory person and be like, okay, Schoenberg or fifth grader from Richmond, Virginia, right? You know,
Right.
Webern or fifth grader from Richmond, Virginia.
Right. Right.
So, yeah,
That's
good
really
times.
funny.
Well, Kendall, I would love to have you on again, and whenever we can, loop back around on this, because I just feel like, we just started this conversation, and I'm really excited to see like what happens for you in the future.
Yeah.
And so we can find you on Spotify, right?
Yeah. Yeah. On Spotify, and all the streaming platforms.
Okay.
You can find my albums and my singles. It's all the music's there. Yeah.
Exciting. Good. Well, we'll make sure we put links on the YouTube, and we'll make sure we put links and shout outs on the socials as well.
Okay.
And what a
Thank
pleasure
you.
to talk with you. And it was pretty emotional in there, Kendall.
Mm.
I was kind of losing. It was emotional.
Oh,
So thank you.
yeah, my pleasure, and it means so much, just being here and talking with you guys. And you guys are very just, I just get the sense you're very grounded, and there's a lot of wisdom um, that you carry, because you get like what the journey I'm on. You guys have done that. You've
Yeah.
done this, and so raising the kids and doing that all while still being in the ministry. And so it's just great for you guys to be in. We're all in the circle, and to be able to have these conversations. I just really enjoyed it. So thank you for having me.
Word.
Kendall.
Yeah.
Mm, thank you so much.
Woo! I love it. Steve, you ready to take us out, buddy? Speaking of what's possible in tonality.
Beautiful.
Link to the pocket. Bye, Kendall.
Thank you, guys.